Praise the Lord. Well, we want to begin this morning the history of the kings, surveying the books of the kings, which are two of the most important books, of course, in the Old Testament. You could actually just make a study of these two books, or we should say with Samuel, Kings, which originally were one book. That is, Samuel was one book, Kings were one. There's enough material here about the history of Israel we could spend time just in that. But we trust through the survey you'll get enough of it to realize that the prophets, most of them are prophesying during this period. So you could fit most of the books of the prophets right in 1st, 2nd Kings. The name of the book is taken from the contents, of course, the books of Kings. The author, by tradition, is Jeremiah. The reason for that is because he's living in Jerusalem at the time of the fall, so he can give an eyewitness report of that, as well as collect the information for the previous kings. And since 2 Kings 24:18 through 25:30 is identical with the 52nd chapter of Jeremiah, 2 Kings 24:18 through 25:30 is word for word to Jeremiah 52. Now that's tradition, of course, as we told you at the outset of this Old Testament survey. You don't always know who wrote a book, but we follow the tradition of the nation of Israel, who assigned it to Jeremiah, unless we have reason not to. Purpose of the books. Its historical purpose, it traces the history of Israel from the reign of Solomon to the fall of Judah. David's reign, of course, is 2 Samuel. Traces the reign of Solomon to the fall of Judah. Spiritually, the purpose of the book is to reveal the spiritual apostasy and decline of the two kingdoms, Israel and Judah, as Moses predicted in Deuteronomy 31. And you've noticed, reading ahead of me, that the success of the reign of a king in the books is always determined by that king's loyalty to God. Now that's a principle in the two books you want to remember. Every one of the kings of Israel were wicked and idolatrous and thus condemned. That's why Israel fell first, after the kingdoms divided into Israel and Judah. Every one of the 19 kings of Israel were rejected by God. A few in Judah were regenerate and listed as good kings. You need to know the names of those. We might ask you that on a test, because there's so few of them. You should know who in the Old Testament God accepted as the kings. There was David. Of course, he's in Samuel. David. Solomon, because he was David's son, but God, of course, judges him harshly for his sins. But Solomon, of course, no question that he was saved, though he went into form of idolatry because of his wives. Asa, Jehoshaphat, Joash, you can spell them the way they sound, Amaziah, Uzziah, that's U-Z-Z-I-A-H. Jotham, or Jotham. Hezekiah, and Josiah. 10 kings in Judah, none in Israel. All right, so much for the introduction. Have any questions on spelling or anything? Why, don't hesitate to ask. But you can find, if you can read your own writing, you can find the spelling on those. I'll give you an outline of the two books together. Very simple. The Reign of Solomon, chapters 1 to 11. The Divided Kingdom to the Fall of Israel, chapter 12 to 2 Kings 17. The Kingdom of Judah to the Babylonian exile, chapters 18 through 25. That covers a lot of material, but that's the broad general outline of the books. Then we'll give you subdivisions as we survey the chapters. All right, let's look first of all at the Reign of Solomon, 1 Kings 1 to 11. Now, open your Bibles. We've got any visitors? We've got Bibles, so we think twice as much of you if we see you looking at the Bible and not the teacher. If you need a Bible, here's one. Anyone? Everybody must have a Bible. All right, the Reign of Solomon. Now we have in chapter 1 Adonijah's usurpation of David's throne. Adonijah's usurpation of David's throne and the anointing of Solomon as king. Chapter 1. Now, you want to open your Bibles because we will be looking at several important incidents in these books. Okay.
Adonijah, his name, from our knowledge of Scripture, why, if he's such a quote-unquote wicked man, why the name?
Well, because the parents always didn't know how they'd turn out. They always had hope. See, this is one of David's sons. He had several wives. And Solomon is the one God chose through Bathsheba and David's union over in 2 Samuel 7. Remember, he said, your son. And we didn't read all that chapter, but he gives him his name. God gives him another name besides Solomon, beloved of the Lord. But Adonijah, which is from, as you can see, Adon, Lord, and Yahweh. Yahweh is Lord, is what it means. But he didn't turn out to be, like Samuel had two sons that were wicked. So David was old and stricken in years. Now he's quite old. And they covered him with clothes, but it gat no heat, as the King James says. So since he already had several wives, he looked around for a nice, attractive woman and found Abishag, a Shunammite. Verse 4, the damsel was very fair, cherished the king, and ministered to him, but the king knew her not. He was too old to care about women. They were hoping, just to kind of revive his interest and all. He's quite old. He's ready to die. And then Adonijah, the son of Haggith, exalted himself, saying, I will be king. And he prepared him chariots and horsemen and 50 men to run before him. Now he knew the prophecy and all that came through Nathan about Solomon being the heir. But Adonijah is the oldest, so he feels he has the right, since he's unregenerate anyway, he feels he has the right as the eldest son, because the eldest son always is the heir, as you know. But he didn't have the right to usurp the throne. That was his father's prerogative, to appoint the one that God had given to be king, Solomon. And so his father had not displeased him at any time in saying, why hast thou done so? And so he gathers together, verse 7, Joab, who is David's general, Abiathar, the priest. Now Abiathar is of the line of Eli. And you remember back in 1 Samuel 3, God took the priesthood away from Eli because he did not correct his sons, who were priests and sinful. And so Abiathar and Joab go with this rebellion. But Zadok, which is the chosen line of the priests, which God will later appoint to fulfill the prophecy against Eli, Zadok the priest, verse 8, And Benaiah, who later becomes Solomon's general, and Nathan the prophet were not invited, of course. And neither was Solomon, verse 10. Wherefore Nathan the prophet spake unto Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon, saying, Hast thou not heard that Adonijah the son of Haggith doth reign? And David our Lord knoweth it not. Now therefore come, let me, I pray thee, give thee counsel, thou mayest save thine own life and the life of thy son Solomon. Go and get thee unto the king David, and say to him, Didst thou not, my lord, O king, swear unto thy handmaid, saying, Assuredly Solomon thy son shall reign after me, and he shall sit upon my throne. Why then doth Adonijah reign? Behold, while thou yet talkest there with the king, I will come in after thee and confirm thy words. So they have this little plot to convince David, but it's of the Lord, of course. So Bathsheba does that, and while she's saying those things to David, Nathan comes in and confirms the word that Adonijah has revolted. And so David decides that this is time to act on behalf of Solomon. Verse 32, And so King David said, Call me Zadok the priest, Nathan the prophet, Benaiah the son of Jehoiada. And they came to the king. The king said to them, Take with you the servants of your Lord, and cause Solomon my son to ride upon my own mule, and bring him down to Gihon. Now, whoever's riding on the king's mule, of course, which would be recognizable by all, probably a white, very, very handsome beast, they would know that whoever's on that king's mule is the one David has chosen. And let Zadok the priest and Nathan the prophet anoint him their king over Israel, and blow ye the trumpet and say, God save King Solomon, which is the origin of the phrase you hear still in England, God save the queen or king, whoever's reigning. And then you shall come up after him, that he may come and sit upon my throne, for he shall be king in my stead, and I have appointed him to be ruler over Israel and Judah. So this is happening before David dies. See, it never happened before in Israel. They appointed a son to reign until the king died. As you read and do read over and over, this is the way it happened. But David has to do something quickly. And verse 39, Zadok the priest took the horn of oil out of the tabernacle and anointed Solomon. And they blew the trumpet. All the people said, God save the king. And all the people came up after him. The people piped with pipes and rejoiced with great joy, so that the earth rent with the sound of them, making quite a noise. And Adonijah and his guests hear it. See, he's prepared a great feast, invited everyone but Nathan, Zadok, and Solomon, so that they will accept him as king. So when they heard it, and Joab heard the sound of the trumpet, he said, Wherefore is this noise of the city being in an uproar? And while he yet spake, behold, Jonathan, the son of Abiathar the priest, came, and Adonijah said to him, Come in, for thou art a valiant man, and bring us good tidings. He was hoping that he thought all Jerusalem was shouting, God save Adonijah the king. And Jonathan answered and said to Adonijah, Verily our Lord King David hath made Solomon king, and the king hath sent with him Zadok, Nathan, and Benaiah, and so forth. And they've caused him to sit on the king's mule. They've anointed him king. Verse 49, and all the guests that were with Adonijah were afraid and rose up and went every man his way. So they left poor old Adonijah there with nothing but the food. And Adonijah feared because of Solomon, and arose and went and caught hold on the horns of the altar. See, he knows what's coming next. Beheading. It'd be his. Because, you see, he's usurped the throne, and what's it signify to grab hold of the horns of the altar? Anyone? Yeah. Well, horns signify power, and that's why they're on the altar. And they signify the power and presence of God there on God's altar. And to grab hold on the horns of the altar means that they could not be hurt or slain while holding to the altar. And that doesn't always work, as we find out. And it was told Solomon, saying, Behold, Adonijah fears King Solomon, for lo, he's caught hold on the horns of the altar, saying, Let King Solomon swear unto me today that he will not slay his servant with the sword. Now he's calling himself a servant. And so Solomon said, If he will show himself a worthy man, there shall not a hair of him fall to the earth. But if wickedness shall be found in him, he shall die. So King Solomon sent and brought him down from the altar, and he came and bowed himself to King Solomon. And Solomon said unto him, Go to thine house. Well, if he would have listened to that advice, he would have not had happen to him what did happen. Chapter 2 is the death of David. And in this chapter we see Adonijah's second plan to usurp the throne and the prophecy regarding Eli fulfilled. Now the days of David drew nigh that he should die, and he charged Solomon his son, saying, I go the way of all the earth. Be thou strong therefore, and show thyself a man. And keep the charge of the Lord thy God, to walk in his ways, to keep his statutes and his commandments and his judgments and his testimonies, as is written in the law of Moses, that thou mayest prosper in all that thou doest, and whithersoever thou turnest thyself. That the Lord may continue his word, which he spake concerning me, saying, If the children take heed to their way, meaning David's children, to walk before me in truth with all their heart, with all their soul, there shall not fail thee, said he, a man on the throne of Israel. So that's his charge. We read down in verse 10 that David died. He slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. David reigned 40 years, Saul reigned 40 years. So the kingdom is now 80 years old. And all the days that David reigned over Israel were 40 years, 7 years in Hebron, 33 years in Jerusalem. And then sat Solomon upon the throne of David his father, and his kingdom was established greatly. Well, Adonijah should have left well enough alone. But here he goes to scheming again. And see if you can see what was signified. As Solomon, riding on David's mule, told the people whom David had selected to be king, look what Adonijah asked for, and why does he ask for what he asks for? Have you figured this out yet? Adonijah the son of Haggith came to Bathsheba, the mother of Solomon. And she said, Comest thou peaceably? And he said, Peaceably. He said, Moreover, I have somewhat to say to thee. And she said, Say on. And he said, Thou knowest that the kingdom was mine, and that all Israel set their faces on me, that I should reign. Howbeit the kingdom is turned about and has become my brother's. For it is his from the Lord. See, he knew that. He doesn't mind saying it's his, but then he knows that it doesn't belong to him from the Lord. And now I ask one petition of thee, deny me not. She said unto him, Say on. He said, Speak, I pray thee, unto Solomon the king, for he will not say to thee, Nay. Speak to him that he give me Abishag, the Shunammite, to wife. And Bathsheba said, Well, I will speak for thee unto the king. Why does he ask for Abishag? Anyone know?
Another means to the throne.
Well, yeah, it's another means, but... Yeah, Abishag is David's wife. His last wife they took for him. Well, let's read on. So she goes and asks the question of Solomon. He's king. Verse 21, she said, Let Abishag be given to Adonijah, thy brother, to wife. Verse 22 tells you what I'm asking you. And King Solomon answered and said unto his mother, And why dost thou ask Abishag for Adonijah? Ask for him the kingdom also. Have you got it yet? For he is mine elder brother. See, you follow the line. If God doesn't intervene, then the elder brother is made king each time. Why does he want David's wife? Then King Solomon sware by the Lord, saying, God do so to me, and more also, if Adonijah has not spoken this word against his own life. Must be something serious asking for Abishag. Now therefore, so the Lord liveth, and has established me, and set me on the throne of David my father, who hath made me an house, as he promised, and Adonijah shall be put to death this day. And King Solomon sent by the hand of Benaiah the son of Jehoiada, and fell upon him, and he died. And to Abiathar the priest, who went with Adonijah in the original rebellion, he said, Get thee to Anathoth and to thine own fields, for thou art worthy of death. He's talking to the high priest. But I will not at this time put thee to death, because thou bearest the ark of the Lord for David my father, and because thou hast been afflicted in all wherein my father was afflicted. So Solomon thrust out Abiathar from being priest unto the Lord, that he might fulfill the word of the Lord, which he spake concerning the house of Eli in Shiloh. That's 1 Samuel 3. Then tidings came to Joab, and Joab turned after Adonijah, though he turned not after Absalom. And Joab fled to the tabernacle of the Lord, caught hold on the horns of the altar. Now there's Adonijah got spared because he grabbed the horns, but Solomon wasn't going to fall for that twice, and he sends someone right into the temple, takes hold of him, and slays him. Ordinarily it'll work, but it didn't. Well, to ask for Abishag, David's wife, and people see Adonijah with David's wife, then they say, well, he's the eldest and he got the choice wife, so they put two and two together, and it's saying that David selected him. That's why Solomon said what he did. Why don't you ask for him the kingdom also, if you're asking for the wife? Because that's what you're asking for. Okay, you got it down? Then we'll move on. He understood the politics of it. Verse 36, and the king put Benaiah the son of Jehoiada in the room of Joab, who has been slain, and Zadok the priest did the king put in the room of Abiathar. So there is the change of the priesthood to the chosen line. The Zadokian priesthood replaces that of Eli. Still of the family of Aaron, but fulfills the curse against the line of Eli, because he did not rebuke his sons. You see, some people don't quite understand the significance of Jesus' words in the Gospels when he said, if you love son, daughter, husband, wife more than me, he says you can't be my disciple. And in any time of tests, so many Christians fail at this point. They'll put a son or a daughter before the Lord. They will. I mean, in so many ways. They will take up for them even when they know they're wrong, rather than saying the word of the Lord comes first, or the Lord comes first. And so the curse upon Eli is because he did not remove his sons from being priests because of their sins. So it's a pretty serious thing, dear friends, that we see all the principles in the New Testament set forth here in the Old. So you need to keep that in mind. We can say, amen, yeah, that's right, until it's your child, your son. Then where do you stand? And I trust I'm not misunderstood when I say this, but I don't put anything before the word of the Lord. It just will never happen. There's no such thing as putting anything before the Lord. And it's the only way it can be. You're not going to go very deep with the Lord until you settle Luke 14 for yourself, Luke 14:25. Because the Bible shows again and again, those who do not, God judges them severely. Now that's just a principle. That doesn't mean you kick a son or daughter out to be faithful to the Lord. But if it required that, then that's the way the choice would have to go. But then we know faith always can overrule in the end and redeem too. Chapter 3, Solomon's prayer and his choice of wisdom. 1 Kings 3. Well, here you see, we're not told yet, but you see the beginning of Solomon's downfall. Solomon made affinity with the Pharaoh, king of Egypt. God said, don't do those things. And he took Pharaoh's daughter and brought her into the city of David until he made an end of building his own house and the temple and the wall of Jerusalem. Now later on you're going to see it's wives like this that turned his heart from the Lord. Not completely, he didn't become an apostate, but he came idolatrous as well. As he worshipped not only Yahweh but other gods, we'll see. But here's where it starts. Made affinity, covenant, agreement. God told them not to ever do that with the foreign nations, that they didn't need to make alliances because he would take care of them. Verse 5, in Gibeon the Lord appeared to Solomon in a dream at night, and God said, ask what I shall give thee. And Solomon said, of course this is before his downfall, and everything looks good now. Solomon said, thou hast showed unto thy servant David my father great mercy, according as he walked before thee in truth and in righteousness and in uprightness of heart with thee. Thou hast kept for him this great kindness. For thou hast given him a son to sit on his throne, as it is this day. And now, O Lord my God, thou hast made thy servant king instead of David my father, and I am but a little child. I know not how to go out or come in. Now this, he isn't wise yet. He became the wisest man on earth. And he sees himself as a little child. And thy servant is in the midst of thy people, which thou hast chosen, a great people that cannot be numbered nor counted for multitude. So God said in verse 5, ask what I shall give thee. Now he could have asked for anything. Give therefore thy servant an understanding heart to judge thy people, that I may discern between good and bad, for who is able to judge this, thy so great a people? And the speech pleased the Lord, that Solomon had asked this thing. And God said unto him, because thou hast asked this thing, and hast not asked for this thyself long life, neither hast thou asked for riches for thyself, nor hast thou asked the life of thine enemies, but hast asked for thyself understanding to discern judgment. Behold, I have done according to thy words. I have given thee a wise and understanding heart, so that there was none like thee before thee, neither after thee shall any arise like unto thee. Now that means what it says. There has never been or never shall be a man as wise as Solomon. Now Jesus is, of course, in another realm. But no man will ever have his wisdom. And I have also given thee that which thou hast not asked, both riches and honor, so there should not be among any of the kings like unto thee all thy days. If thou wilt walk in my ways, to keep my statutes and my commandments, as thy father David did walk, then I will lengthen thy days. So it would give him long life, plus riches, all the things he didn't ask for. And Solomon woke, and behold, it was a dream, and he came to Jerusalem and stood before the ark of the covenant of the Lord, and offered up burnt offerings and peace offerings, and made a feast to all of his servants. Well, God gave him the wisdom right at that point. And then here we see a demonstration of some of it. Then came two women, harlots, unto the king, and stood before him. One woman said, O my Lord, I and this woman dwell in one house. I was delivered of a child with her in the house, and it came to pass the third day, after that I was delivered, this woman was delivered also. And we were together there with no stranger with us in the house, save we two in the house. This woman's child died in the night because she overlaid it. She arose at midnight, took my son from beside me while thy handmaid slept, and laid it in her bosom, laid the dead child in my bosom. When I arose in the morning to give my child suck, behold, it was dead. But when I had considered it in the morning, behold, it was not my son which I did bear. The other woman said, Nay, but the living is my son, and the dead is thy son. And this said, No, but the dead is thy son, and the living is my son. Thus they spake before the king. Then said the king, The one saith, This is my son that liveth, and thy son is dead. And the other saith, Nay, but thy son is the dead, and my son is the living. The king said, Here's his wisdom, bring me a sword. So they brought a sword before the king. The king said, Divide the living child in two, and give half to this and half to the other. That would settle the argument. But he had wisdom, because the woman whose living child it was said to the king, for her bowels yearned upon her son, and she said, O my Lord, give her the living child, and in no wise slay it. The other said, Let it be neither mine nor thine, but divide it. Then the king answered and said, Give her the living child, in no wise slay it, she is the mother thereof. And all Israel heard of the judgment which the king had judged, and they feared the king, for they saw that the wisdom of God was in him to do judgment. Now, to do judgment means to do justly, of course. Judgment is often used in that sense in the Old Testament. Solomon's power, wealth, and wisdom in chapter 4. That's just one instance out of course, there'd be thousands of them. His power, wealth, and wisdom. Judah and Israel were many, verse 20, as the sand which is by the sea in multitude, eating and drinking and making merry. Solomon reigned over all the kingdoms from the river to the land of the Philistines, the border of Egypt. They brought presents and served Solomon all the days of his life. Now you have to read that chapter to see his wealth and power and extent of his kingdom, his wisdom. Verse 25, Judah and Israel dwelt safely, every man under his vine and under his fig tree, from Dan to Beersheba, all the days of Solomon. No wars during Solomon's time. And Solomon had 40,000 stalls of horses for his chariots and 12,000 horsemen. Speaks here of him having a navy. He had mines, gold mines, iron, copper mines. He sent ships all over the then known world and brought back all sorts of treasures and so forth. It's all told us there. Verse 29, God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding exceeding much, and largeness of heart, even as the sand that is on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom excelled the wisdom of all the children of the East and all the wisdom of Egypt. Now that's quite a statement. You read of the wise men who came from the East at the birth of Jesus. He was wiser than all the children of the East, all the wise men all over the world, wiser than all the wisdom of Egypt. It's impossible to describe how wise this man was. I mean, that's what the Word is trying to show you in those few verses. To name some of the wise men of that day, he was wiser than all men, than Ethan, and Heman, and Darda, and his fame was in all nations round about. He spake 3,000 proverbs. We have a few of them in the book of Proverbs. 3,000. And his songs were 1,005. We've got 150 psalms written by David and some others, but Solomon wrote 1,005 psalms. He spake of trees, from the cedar tree that's in Lebanon, even unto the hyssop that springeth out of the wall. From the great cedars in Lebanon to the little flowering bush or something that would grow out of the wall. He knew all about botany, biology. He spake of beasts, of fowls, of creeping things, of fishes. Now it says he's wiser than anyone before him or anyone after. That includes all of our biologists, zoologists, scientists, and so forth today. Now he didn't know about space travel and all that. He didn't need to. But we're talking about the earth itself, you see, and humanity. He knew more than all the people put together. And there came of all people to hear the wisdom of Solomon, from all the kings of the earth, which had heard of his wisdom. God isn't just making him wise because he wanted wisdom to judge his people, but this is the realization for a short while of God's purpose in establishing his kingdom and raising up a messianic line. He's going to have a period of peace, a wise person, great king, and so forth, which would typify in a little way Jesus himself when he would come, or when he comes to reign again. So God was showing the world what his kingdom was like, in a small way, of course. Chapters 5 to 7, we have the building of the temple. 2 Samuel 7, David wanted to build it, but God said, no, I've used you as a man of war, and the one who will build it will be a reign of peace. So we have it set forth in chapters 5 to 7, which we won't take time to look at, but it's quite a temple. No temple like it in all the world before or after Solomon's temple. Chapter 8 is the dedication of the temple by Solomon and his prayer. 9 and 10, Solomon's greatness and wealth. Verse 2 of chapter 9, the Lord appeared to Solomon a second time, as he had appeared unto him at Gibeon. And the Lord said, I have heard thy prayer. He's just prayed a prayer after the dedication of the temple. It's a beautiful prayer you ought to read. He says, I've heard thy prayer, thy supplication that thou hast made before me. I have hallowed this house which thou hast built to put my name there forever. Mine eyes, mine heart shall be there perpetually. And if thou wilt walk before me as David thy father walked in integrity of heart and in uprightness to do according to all that I have commanded thee, and will keep my statutes and my judgments, then I will establish the house of thy kingdom upon Israel forever, as I promised to David thy father, saying, there shall not fail thee a man upon the throne of Israel. But if you shall turn from following me, ye or your children, and will not keep my commandments, my statutes, which I've set before you, but go and serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel out of the land, which I have given them, and this house, which I have hallowed for my name, will I cast out of my sight, and Israel shall be a proverb and a byword among the people, as we know happened in the fall of Jerusalem, the temple. His wisdom reaches out to the uttermost parts of the earth. And Solomon's up here in Jerusalem reigning, and way down here, Queen of Sheba hears about it. So she comes. She's way down here. And when the Queen of Sheba heard of the fame of Solomon concerning the name of the Lord, she came to prove him with hard questions. Like a woman. She came with a very great train. That's a camel caravan, with camels that bear spices, much gold, precious stones. She was vastly wealthy, of a very, very rich kingdom, the Queen of Sheba. But when she sees Solomon's wealth and wisdom, her heart faints within her. She came and communed with him with all that was in her heart, and Solomon told her all her questions. There was not anything hid from the king which he told her not. And when the Queen of Sheba had seen all of Solomon's wisdom and the house that he built, and the meat of his table, the sitting of his servants, the attendance of his ministers, and their apparel, and his cupbearers, and his ascent by which he went up into the house of the Lord, there was no more spirit in her. She's a vastly wealthy person. Brings him a king's ransom just as an offering, because it was customary to bring something. And she said to the king, "It was a true report that I heard in mine own land of thy acts and of thy wisdom. Howbeit I believed not the words until I came, and mine eyes have seen it, and behold, the half was not told me. Thy wisdom and prosperity exceedeth the fame which I heard. Blessed are thy men, blessed are these thy servants, which stand continually before thee, that hear thy wisdom. Blessed be the Lord thy God, which delighteth in thee, to set thee on the throne of David, throne of Israel. Because the Lord loved Israel forever, therefore made he thee king to do judgment and justice." She gave the king 120 talents of gold. Now 1 talent is no small amount. 120 talents of gold, spices very great, precious stones. There came no more such abundance of spices as these which the Queen of Sheba gave to Solomon. Well, Solomon in turn gives her all she desires. Verse 13, Queen of Sheba, all her desire, whatever she asks. Besides, he gave her a royal bounty. So she turned and went to her own country, she and her servants. Then it speaks of his wealth. Verse 24, and all the earth sought to Solomon to hear his wisdom, which God had put in his heart. See, it's no little isolated nation now we're dealing with at this period. We're dealing with the very center of world interest, just like it's happening again now for the preparation of the return of the Messiah. See how God can do this? Take a little nation of slaves and make all the earth come to see their wealth and wisdom. Did it once, he'll do it again. Well, you have to read those chapters, see just how vast his kingdom was. I gave you a map once of Solomon's empire in biblical geography, the extent of his kingdom, how vast it was. And it was at peace. Well, all that's fine. It's too bad we have to get to chapter 11, Solomon's sin. Everything was going nicely, and he made the mistake. God made one man for one wife and one woman for one man, and he had a ratio of 1,000 to 1. I mean, there's no way he could remain faithful to multiply 1,000 to 1 what God had said not to do. But King Solomon loved many strange women. Now, he wasn't just multiplying wives, say, I'm the greatest king, but he just loved every woman that was attractive. King Solomon loved many strange women, together with the daughter of Pharaoh. We've already seen her. Women of the Moabites, Ammonites, Edomites, Zidonians, Hittites, all these Gentiles, foreigners. Of the nations concerning which the Lord said unto the children of Israel, you shall not go into them. See, he's disobeying God. Neither shall they come in to you, for surely they will turn away your heart after their gods. And Solomon clave unto these in love. He not only disobeyed God, but he actually was infatuated with these women. He had 700 wives, princesses, and 300 concubines, and his wives turned away his heart. For it came to pass, when Solomon was old, that his wives turned away his heart after other gods, and his heart was not perfect with the Lord his God, as was the heart of David his father. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth. Now that's a sexual symbol. She's the consort of Baal. For Solomon went after Ashtoreth, the goddess of the Zidonians, and after Milcom, the abomination of the Ammonites. And Solomon did evil in the sight of the Lord, and went not fully after the Lord, as did David his father. Then did Solomon build a high place for Chemosh, the abomination of Moab, in the hill that's before Jerusalem, and for Molech, the abomination of the children of Ammon. He started actually building, shrines and so forth to these false gods. Likewise did he for all his strange wives, which burnt incense and sacrificed to their gods. And the Lord was angry with Solomon, because his heart was turned from the Lord God of Israel, which had appeared unto him twice, inexcusable, appeared unto him twice, told him twice to not do this. And had commanded him concerning this very thing, that he should not go after other gods, but he kept not that which the Lord commanded. Wherefore the Lord said to Solomon, Forasmuch as this is done of thee, and thou hast not kept my covenant and my statutes which I have commanded thee, I will surely rend the kingdom from thee, and will give it to thy servant. That's literally what happened. Jeroboam the first was a servant of Solomon. Notwithstanding, in thy days I will not do it for David thy father's sake, but I will rend it out of the hand of thy son. Howbeit I will not rend away all the kingdom, but will give one tribe to thy son for David my servant's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake which I have chosen. So he begins to stir up adversaries against Solomon. The Lord stirred up Hadad, the Edomite, is one, verse 14. Another is verse 23, Rezin is another adversary. Verse 26 is another adversary, Jeroboam, and this is the one who is his servant, Solomon's servant, verse 26, Jeroboam the first. There is a Jeroboam the second that reigns later. Even he lifted up his hand against the king. Verse 27, and this was the cause that he lifted up his hand against the king. Solomon built Milo, repaired the breaches of the city of David his father. The man Jeroboam was a mighty man of valor, and Solomon, seeing the young man that he was industrious, he made him ruler over all the charge of the house of Joseph. And it came to pass at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, that the prophet Ahijah, the Shilonite, found him in the way, and he had clad himself with a new garment, and the two were alone in the field. And Ahijah caught the new garment that was on him, and rent it in 12 pieces. What for? He said to Jeroboam, Take thee 10 pieces, for thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, Behold, I will rend the kingdom out of the hand of Solomon, and will give 10 tribes to thee. But he shall have 1 tribe for my servant David's sake, and for Jerusalem's sake, the city which I've chosen out of all the tribes of Israel. Now that only makes 11, doesn't it? Had 12 pieces. Anyone know why? Benjamin and Judah are always counted as 1 tribe, right? So they're 12, but Benjamin's just a little tribe right by Judah. They're generally counted as 1. But there are 12 tribes, actually. And when he gave him Judah, why, Benjamin kind of went along with it. He tells him why, because he's gone after foreign gods. 34, Howbeit I'll not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him prince all the days of his life for David my servant's sake, whom I chose because he kept my commandments, my statutes. Notice he isn't doing it for Solomon's sake. God isn't about to excuse idolatry and unfaithfulness. But David was faithful, so David never once even looked at another god. He was not perfect. Sin with Bathsheba, so forth, but he confessed those sins, was forgiven. But apostasy is something else. But I will take the kingdom out of his son's hand, and will give it to thee, even 10 tribes, and unto his son I will give 1 tribe, actually including Benjamin, which is 2, that David my servant may have a light always before me in Jerusalem, the city which I've chosen to put my name there. And I will take thee, and thou shalt reign according to all thy soul desireth, and shall be king over Israel. Now he's just a foreman, you see, servant of Solomon, a foreman over some building. And it shall be, if thou wilt hearken unto all that I command thee, and wilt walk in my ways, and do that is right in my sight, to keep my statutes and commandments as David my servant did, I will be with thee, and will build thee a sure house, as I built for David, and will give Israel to thee. Now that's quite a promise. Now in God's providence, His eternal decrees, we know there can't be but one kingdom. But you see, He always leaves it up to the individual. If they will be faithful, it's like Jesus said to the Jews, if they had received Him, then John the Baptist could have been Elijah. He could have fulfilled that prophecy. He wasn't Elijah. But that's why the apparently not contradictory statement in Matthew 12, but they said, why did the Scripture say Elijah is yet to come? Jesus said He is yet to come. But He said if you would receive it, He said He's already come, referring to John the Baptist. He said He will come, and yet He's already come. So He offered the kingdom to Israel. If they would have received it, then the Gentiles would have never been saved, and there would have been the fulfillment of all the prophecies, you see. It's possible that way, but of course God knew it wouldn't happen that way. He had already ordained that we would be saved. And so had Jeroboam obeyed the Lord, there would have been two kingdoms, and there couldn't be two. There had to be just one, Judah. But God didn't make Jeroboam disobey, which He did later. But He promises him here that He will bless him with the nation of Israel. He said, I will, verse 39, I will for this afflict the seed of David, but not forever. Solomon sought therefore to kill Jeroboam. He heard about this. And Jeroboam arose and fled to Egypt. See, Solomon's so far so backslidden now. He is an apostate. You see, he still worships the Lord, but he's in gross sin because of his wives. See, one sin leads to another. Now, he knows of the prophet and the prophecy, and he sends to kill this man instead of saying, well, as Eli, at least Eli said, this is the hand of the Lord. Let the Lord do what's good in His sight. So Jeroboam arose, fled to Egypt to King Shishak, and he was there until the death of Solomon. And the rest of the acts of Solomon and all that he did, and his wisdom, are they not written in the book of the Acts of Solomon? See, there's another book we don't have. God didn't preserve all the books that were written, just the ones He wanted. And the time that Solomon reigned in Jerusalem was 40 years. That's Saul 40, David 40, Solomon 40. And Solomon slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David his father, and Rehoboam his son reigned in his stead. So here we come now to the second division. Divided kingdom, 1 Kings 12, 2 Kings 17. Think we can cover it in 5 minutes? No, I guess not. I'll tell you, a survey is supposed to move a little faster than this, but it's generally, as I've said before, taught 4 days a week. And I can't skip over just to say we did it, so we'll just take whatever time's necessary. Although a survey, you recognize, I've said, is just that. It isn't trying to deal with it verse by verse. All right, divided kingdom occurred 931, as we just told you, 931 B.C. Kingdom has lasted 120 years. 40 Saul, 40 David, 40 Solomon. 3 times 4 is 12, 120 years. Before it divides. Then, after it divides, Israel is under the reign of Jeroboam, Judah under the reign of Rehoboam, first 2 kings of the divided kingdoms. Rehoboam, Jeroboam. Israel lasts about 200 years. Judah will last about 300 after this division. Israel goes into captivity 721 B.C. to Assyria. Judah goes into Babylonian captivity 586 B.C. For the first 80 years, there is almost continual war between Israel and Judah, the divided kingdoms, for the first 80 years. I think I shall stop there because it's a good place to begin again. When we get into the reasons for the division of the kingdom and so forth, we won't spend sufficient time.